Hi everyone, this is Jim Tolles. Today I want to talk a little bit about what it means to go with the flow. It's something that you hear a lot of people talk about in the spiritual path, but I think it's also something that people don't really understand. I think there's this idea that we just kind of let currents push us around anywhere in life. We just kind of are very passive, we just accept everything in that way. And it also, I think, is founded on that misunderstanding of what acceptance means, where people seem to think that acceptance is this passive way of just letting life be whatever life is. But it really, in that idea, negates the understanding that we have a great amount of influence, a great ability to guide and shape. That's why you hear people use the word co-create. It's the idea that we're creating a part and other people are creating their parts and the universe as a whole is creating a part. And we have all these different pieces that we're building together. And so from that space, you start to see that we're very dynamic beings. And while the other extreme is the ego that's trying to control and do and create everything on its own, it thinks it can do something on its own. And that's never really the case. Even if you plant seeds, and I'm just going to grow my own food on my own, it's like, well, you're still dependent on the soil and the water and the fertilizer, whether the seeds even sprout, and the sun. So you see, it's impossible to really do just about anything on your own. And we certainly have our own choices, and this is where we're powerful. And that includes how we're flowing in life. But you kind of have to take a big step back before we even talk about are you going with the flow or how to go with the flow, to look at your life. Like, okay, so what are the currents in my life? What do they look like? What are the choices I'm already making? What choices don't I realize that I'm making? Because in so many ways, we're very unconscious about the things that we think we want in life. There are big social ultimatums, imperatives that are kind of built into us, saying that we should have families, or we should make a certain amount of money, or we should be educated, and all these different things that are kind of sitting down in those structures that are telling us this is how to live our lives, and this is the flow we should be in. But we don't actually know if any of that's true. For many people, they're not going to be family people. And so one of those big social programs is actually wrong for them. But it's very easy for many people. They just go along with what they think they're supposed to do. They're flowing. They think they're flowing anyway. And so they go to college, right? And it's easy to do some of these things because so many of the structures of this culture are built to push people in that direction. So it doesn't seem that hard at times. And for some people, it's more hard or harder because they really don't want to go that way. But for a lot of other people, there's just the power of your own choice, even if you don't realize you're making it. And so you go to school, and you get married, and you get this job, and you get a partner, and then you have a family, right? And you just kind of go along, and it's pretty easy for a lot of people, and this is why you have the midlife crisis, where suddenly they realize they don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing this job, and now they're kind of caught up in the momentum that they've created through all these choices, that they thought they were just kind of flowing along. Along with this is the idea that whatever feels good to us is the flow, and that's just incomplete, because there's a way that being in the flow does feel good. It feels very true to us, but feeling true is different than feeling pleasurable and feeling good, because there are definitely many things that have moved through my life where I've felt very much in the flow, but I was going through difficult lessons. And so going through those difficult lessons wasn't necessarily fun. It's kind of the idea that, the river, the flow, goes from being very calm and slow and steady, and then suddenly you hit these rapids, right? And that requires a lot more active engagement, right? And so this is the metaphor of going with the flow when we're really actively engaged with life, with our lives, with making choices, with understanding ourselves. So we also have a paddle. So we can paddle on one side and paddle on the other side when we need to. And that's sort of this interesting balance of staying actively engaged and when we put the paddle back in the boat and we just let ourselves flow. And so one of the big things that happens for those of you who are awakened is suddenly you're kind of thrust into this deeper flow that's within you of where you really want to go. And this can be very jarring because for many of you, you're so far out of that, or you've been just drifting along on the river and you've been getting beached and you didn't really care that much, or you just kept saying, why does this always happen to me? And now suddenly you're in the currents, all right, and things are moving, and sometimes there's a lot of these blockages inside yourself that have been fighting this flow, and so you're running up against your own resistance again and again. It feels like you're just getting thrown on rocks and overturned, and you're sucking in water in the flow. And you're like, this is awful. How is this better? My old life looks so much easier. And once again, ease doesn't mean that you're following the path of your heart. Ease may simply mean that you're doing what's easy, what's convenient. What you're taught is what you're supposed to do. And as you come into the truth of yourself and you come into the space of illumination, you'll see where that's not what you're supposed to do. But a delightful thing does happen as that transition calms down, is that pretty soon you are really flowing. But being in the conscious flow is very different than the unconscious flow. The unconscious flow where you didn't understand the choices you made, and you were just drifting along, really. Even if you thought you were paddling, you really didn't understand yourself, didn't understand the greater picture of life and the greater picture of yourself. In the conscious state, you are much more aware of what your limitations are. And that's a powerful thing to understand, because then you kind of have a better sense of when to ask for help, when you need to kind of pause, in your paddling to kind of get your bearings. Right? There's way less of that ego sense of trying to control anything or being out of control or being the victim. Right? So for people who've been the victim, you actually are probably more actively paddling in your life at certain points. But all of this settles down more and more, and there's a way where you no longer have to make those big corrections. Because initially when you're unconscious, a lot of us tend to have to make some fairly large corrections in our lives because we haven't been doing what we really want to do. But once you're in that and things have opened up and you're no longer resisting it, it can be amazing how easy it is. There is this level of ease to it. That things just continue to arise. That there's so much less to do, but you do stay actively engaged. And so, as I said, it's like if something difficult seems to be coming up in your life, you understand how to paddle, how to move into things, move into those spaces where you can see the rapids coming, to use that as the metaphor of difficulty, or to know when you don't need to go through those and you can see another route now because you're not just drifting along. We're in the old times where you just drift and say, I'll just let whatever happen. And then you go right into this thing and you're tumbled and thrown out of your boat. Now you can see it and you have that perspective of yourself. It's like, oh, this is where this part of the river goes. So I can just go over here and you just make it that much easier. And then you go back in kind of that resting space. And especially in this culture that we always think we have to do something, this can actually be more challenging for those old parts of the ego still hanging out thinking, shouldn't this be more difficult? Or shouldn't I do more? It's like, no, actually. It's like you're clear that you're following your heart in whatever ways feels true to you. You're clear that things are arising in their own time. There's nothing to force. And so in this way you can kind of sit back more and enjoy. And this is the truest sense of going with the flow. You're still actively engaged, still actively aware, seeing the scenery around you. You're not closing your eyes in the middle of the river. You're listening. You're sensing. So it's a very vibrant sort of a place. And while life is still a mystery, like you can only see so far in the river of life, you're also not blind to things. And you can see more than you've ever seen before. And as I said, this is where it makes it easier to avoid potential hazards that you wouldn't have seen or wouldn't have wanted to see. I mean, that's usually the big thing, is there's a level of us that knows all these things, but we don't want to see a lot of things because we're still trying to create stories. We're in the space of the flow. We don't need to make stories. We can see things as they are. And that's the truest sense of that awakened space, that awakened clarity, is we see things as they are, not as we want them to be. And there will still be difficult moments in this river of our lives, and there will be easier moments, and that's just the way it is. So this isn't going to create some perfect, idealistic, luxurious, constantly pleasurable path, which is also a naive idea that people have about the flow, that it'll just always feel great and always be one big party going on. So these are some thoughts about what it means to go with the flow, and I hope it's been helpful for you. You can always find out what I'm talking about at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Once again, my name is Jim Tolles, and I hope you're having a beautiful day.